Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Brattleboro Literary Festival. I'm thrilled to be here with Amity Gaige and Caroline Leavitt. Amity Gaige is the author of 4 novels, Oh My Darling, The Folded World, Schroeder, and Sea Wife. She's the winner of a Fulbright and a Guggenheim Fellowship, among many other things, and fellowships also at the MacDowell and Yaddo colonies. Her short stories, essays, and book reviews have appeared in publications such as the New York Times, The Guardian, Harper's Bazaar, and the Yale Review, Slate, among many others. She was the longtime visiting writer at Amherst College and now teaches creative writing at Yale. Caroline Leavitt is the award-winning author of 13 novels, including the New York Times bestseller Pictures of You and Is This Tomorrow, and her new book With and Without You. Her essays and stories have appeared in New York Magazine, Psychology Today, Parenting, Redbook, and Salon, among others, as usual. She's a book critic for People and the Boston Globe and the San Francisco Chronicle. And she teaches novel writing online at both Stanford University and the UCLA Extension Writers Program. Both of their books are available at bookshop.org, and I'm going to now turn it over to them. The other thing I wanted to just let you know is that there's a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. You can ask just questions in there. It's not for comments, but just for questions. And if you want to vote for a question, you can use the little, I think it's a little thumbs up to vote that up the stream. So I will now turn it over to Caroline and Amity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you. Hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody. We decided we were going to start by each giving you a thumbnail of our novel. And I think Amity is going to go first.
Okay, great. I like to try to describe the book in my own words. What I would describe Sea Wife as is a duet between 2 voices, a husband and a wife. It's a story about how they came to buy a boat, a sailboat, sight unseen in Panama, and sail across the Caribbean with their 2 little kids. So they live a very conventional life in Connecticut and decide to take this chance. And it's in an effort to reconnect with one another and to heal Juliet, the protagonist's long-term depression and postpartum depression. So that's how I would describe it. What about you? Would you like to describe yours?
Okay, it's always hard to describe your own book. This is my book, and it's showing up backwards on here, With or Without You. I was deeply interested in what happens in a long-term relationship when one person dramatically and suddenly changes. So it's the story of a long-term couple who've been together over 20 years. And Simon, the guy, is a once famous rock and roller who's lost that fame and still desperately yearns for it. And his long-term partner, Stella, is a very practical nurse who wants him to just grow up and settle down and let's see where we go. And they're really at a breaking point. So they're drinking and there are some drugs. And in the morning, he wakes up and she does not. She's in a coma. And when she wakes up, she's dramatically changed, which kind of does actually happen in Coma. She has a different personality, and she also has a new talent where she can draw, which gives her the fame that she's not so sure she wants, and that Simon still desperately wants. And the only other fun or not fun fact you need to know about this book is that this is not my experience. Although when my son was born, I was in a medically induced coma for 3.5 weeks, and it was kind of traumatizing. But this book is not my book. It's Stella's book.
Wonderful.
Okay, so I want to start with questions because I have so many for
we were gonna do a little reading.
Oh, we were gonna do a reading. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Amity.
Just a little teaser. We're gonna give you guys a sample of these books so that hopefully you'll want to check them out.
Now you know what I'm like. I barrel ahead. Okay.
Yeah. So as I said, my book it has these 2 voices, and that's a really important part of the book for me. And it actually makes a very cool audiobook because they cast a man and a woman to do those voices as the audiobook. And then there's a 3rd voice, their little daughter, who comes in sort of towards the resolution of the book. And the voices are braided very close together. If you can see there, they one voice is sort of left justified and one is kind of right justified. And that actually does also echo their political leanings, which ends up being useful as well. But since it's just a mini reading, I'm going to read just Juliet. But one thing I've really enjoyed about publishing Sea Wife is that I get to read with another voice, and often a male voice, because that makes it feel more believable, to hear it in the correct gender. I'm just going to read from the beginning. Where does a mistake begin? Lately, I've found this simple question difficult, impossible actually. A mistake has roots in both time and space, a person's reasonings and her whereabouts. Somewhere in the intersection of those two dimensions is the precisely bounded mistake. In nautical terms, its coordinates. Did my mistake begin with the boat or with my marriage itself? I don't think so. I now suspect that my mistake took root in an innocent experience I forgot to decipher, the mystery of which has quietly ruled me. For example, I remember standing beside a blindingly blue Howard Johnson's motel pool at 12 years old, watching a couple undress one another through a half-drawn curtain while my estranged father disputed the bill in the lobby. Should I have looked away? Did the miscalculation occur even earlier, as I sat on a rope rug in clean kindergarten sunlight, and I leaned toward the boy beside me and accepted his insistent whisper? I still feel his dew in my ear. And now I'm sitting in a closet, Michael's closet. I should explain. I moved in a couple days ago. I came in here looking for something of his, and I discovered that the carpet is very plush. The slatted bifold doors filter the sunlight beautifully. I feel calm in here. Hiding in closets is the habit of children, I know. I used to hide in my mother's closet when I was a kid. Her closet contained some dressy silks and wools she never wore. I loved holding these fabrics against my body or stepping into her high heels, as if onto a dais, rehearsing my future. I never felt ashamed. Surely there's some connection between seeking refuge in my mother's closet long ago and hiding in Michael's closet now, but that insight does not help me. Sometimes life just writes you tiny, awful poems. I'm uncertain whether or not I can survive this day. I mean, if I want to. To go outside requires preparation and composure. If I were to go out, to start walking around and seeing people again and going to the grocery store and getting on with it, invariably what someone would ask me is, do you wish you'd never gone? They will expect me to say, yes, our journey was a mistake. Maybe that's what they hope I will say. But saying yes to the boat was my clearest act of loyalty toward my husband. I can't afford to regret it. If I did, I would only be left with my many disloyalties. And I'll stop
wow. That is so great. So great. Okay, I'm going to read a part from Stella's point of view when she's in coma. Stella floats. She doesn't have a body, though she knows it's here, there beside her on the bed. She can hear Simon talking to her, although she can't make out the words. The rise and fall of his voice confuses her. It's rich and almost gravelly, the way it had been when he was in his 20s, when she had first met him and he was still smoking. Allergic to smoke, she had sneezed at his kisses, but he stopped for her. Simon now says something to her, more urgent, but she can't make out a syllable. Grrr, it sounds like a fake kitten growl. Even though she can't understand him, his voice soothes her. It's real and known and familiar. Simon, my Simon. She wants to tell him how sorry she is that they argued. She doesn't think he meant it about their dreams being different. It was the storm raging outside. It was making them both woozy. It was her cold plugging up her sinuses and her headache throbbing. They were both so tired, so exhausted. But how funny. She doesn't have her cold anymore, not here in this place. Here in this place, she isn't aware of her body and its functions. Breathing, sweating, peeing, they all seem part of another life to her, something she used to do, but doesn't need to do any longer. Wave bye-bye, sayonara. The thought of it makes her laugh, makes her glad she still has her sense of humor. Mostly what she does is smell things. Something sharp like lemon whisks by her nose. Wait, she wants to say, say, please wait, but the scent fades and vanishes before she can lock onto it. Feet pat on the floor. Voices dip and rise and grow silent. She feels an elbow bumping against something hard, but she knows it isn't her elbow, so how could she feel it? She dreams too, but isn't so much that she is dreaming as that she feels she's actually there in her dream, dropped down from one place to another. I'm here, she wants to say to Simon. I'm right here. She feels so sorry for him when she hears him crying. She can feel where he is by the heat in the room moving closer to her, warming her. She can hear it too, little skips in his voice, the loss of control. She wants to stroke his hair and tell him, it's going to be okay. Don't worry, baby, she thinks, though she's never once called him baby in real life. Don't worry. And that's mine. Okay, so I have a million questions to ask Amity, and
all right.
I want to start with I thought that what was so thrilling about your book wasn't just that this was a story about survival at sea. It's very much about the survival of a marriage. The sea has its dangers, but so does a marriage. So I'm always really interested in, like, well, why did you write this story? What was haunting you? And then I found out when I was Googling you, where it said you were inspired by a true story about a real life Coast Guard rescue. I would very much like you to talk about that, and also tell us more about what was the thing drawing you into this story and tethering you there.
Okay, all right, sure. I can answer a couple of the facets of that. You guys, this talk goes on till 5 o'clock, so pull, buckle your seatbelts. No, I'm just kidding. So it was sparked by a story that I read in 2014. There was a family who was living on their boat with their 2 young children, and they were crossing the South Pacific when they needed a Coast Guard rescue. The reason they needed one was partially because their little one of the baby had spiked a fever, and it was going to be a long time before that. Anyway, that was. It was unfortunate that it happened, but the problem, I think, that what was interesting to me was that they faced so much criticism when they came back.
Really?
Said awful things to them online. Was new about that, but
wow.
because they had brought their children on a boat, and it inspired me to think. I think at the time, and when I was thinking about this book, and I wanted to write a book set at sea even before I saw this story, which is a separate question. But what was getting to me, I think, in that moment was why, I live in a suburban Connecticut neighborhood. Okay, full disclosure, and also, my kids dutifully go to school and sit there. I'm not entirely sure that I've got the answers about whether or not this creates happiness for my children. I'm very interested in people who do live in non-traditional ways and in adventures. I've always been interested in adventurers and explorers, especially when the exploration or the adventure fails. I don't know why this is sort of like it's just I think it's a metaphor for me for the journey of life. So I did a bit of research on that family, but this book does not follow that story. It's simply like my other novels. It just gave me an idea.
It gave you an idea.
And so, yeah. And then I started to research a great deal, which I can talk about separately, but, and it became my own story with my own people.
Had you done sailing before you wrote this, or was that something you did because you felt, I'm writing about sailing, I should know what it feels like?
I have not done sailing before. I was not a sailor. It was absurdity for me to try to write a book. I have no idea. I think it's a masochistic, impulse. I mean, you could read it as masochism, or you could read it as sort of like an interesting, like quixotic ambition, where it's kind of like, let's try something really hard and fall down on our face a lot. And then if you can do it, then it'll mean something to you, because it has really been a journey. And that, I have to say, came to pass. It was a very hard book to write, but that that difficulty of writing it, I think, is imbues the writing with that sort of a little bit of stress. It is a survival story.
Right.
And I felt that way too as I was writing it and related to the characters. I also did make my characters novice sailors. The family
Right.
that was rescued on the high seas, they were very good sailors. I made my family just be like, and there are people who do this, let's just try it. It's, you go to the Caribbean, it's not so hard to sail there. The biggest danger in the Caribbean is the reefs actually running into things. So I made them somewhat incompetent sailors, which was better for my story.
I just have to ask you one more question, which is about the ocean. To me, the ocean is terrifying because it's like sinking into mental illness. There's all these, it gets darker and darker as you go down, and there's all these creatures and all these things that can happen. Do you fear the sea, or you just don't like sailing?
I do fear the sea. I think it's very wise to fear the sea. I think it's actually, you're really in trouble if you go sailing and you're not afraid.
Yeah.
When I did, I mean, it's powerful. It's so attractive. And I think that's why I wanted to write a book at sea. What a beautiful landscape. What I noticed once I finally did learn how to sail was, you think it's just the water. It's actually what the experience of sailing is really the weather, and it's the sky, and it's the wind. That's what makes the water change.
Right. That's right. You were talking about that in the book. You're talking about,
Yes.
yeah, it's beautiful to look at, but it's terrifying to
It's
see.
it's completely unknown. It's a bit like the kind of inverse of outer space. I mean, it seems infinite. There's a moment in Sea Wife, and I think when Juliet is she in a huff, she says, "I want to go swimming," and they're in the middle of a long
Right. I was so
passage.
terrified. I kept thinking, why would she do that?
Well,
That's a terrible. He tethers her to the boat, and
yeah.
that was
Well, I was
terrifying.
actually that scene was sort of inspired by the wonderful oh my God, what is it? The Robert Stone book. Somebody in the chat help me out. It's that wonderful book about sailing, but the character there also he there's a scene where he falls off the boat and the boat starts to sail away from him in the middle of the ocean. Anyway, Juliet, what I was going to say about the scene where Juliet goes swimming, she is tethered to the boat, but that she sees the infinite nature of they're in such deep water that there's no bottom, and that it's this vertiginous feeling. It's very powerful and spiritual, I think, to be near the ocean. People love it, and I get it. And it was fun to write, to describe it. But we're supposed to rotate questions.
Oh, right. Okay, I'm sorry. I just got so excited.
I'm
These are
excited
the
too.
questions.
I'm excited. I'm excited too. We can go.
Okay, we'll rotate questions.
Go back and forth, because I think it would be,
okay.
There's so much to talk about, I know, but so it's great that you read from the Coma section where Stella is in a coma. And my question is, as a novelist, I'm familiar with the act of trying to imagine my way into experiences I've not personally gone through that are otherwise foreign or unknown to me. But in this novel, you imagine your way into a character in a coma. And there's probably very few people you could talk to about how that feels, although you just said at the opening that you did experience that, but perhaps it's also difficult to remember. So how did you write such a persuasive?
Okay, well, in my coma, they gave me, which I didn't realize they had such a thing, but they gave me memory blockers. So I did not remember any of my time in my coma. And the thing that traumatized me so much was that everybody else around me, my husband, my family, my sister, my friends, they lived through it, and they were so traumatized they didn't want to talk to me about it. So I had a whole lot of my body remembered. I had a lot of triggers where I would go into a supermarket and see a certain kind of soup, and I would have a panic attack, and my husband would say, well, that was sort of soup that you ate when you were in the hospital. So I did a lot of research. I have this friend, Joseph Clark, who's at the University of Cincinnati, and he does research on comas. And I asked him a whole lot of questions. I wanted to know, like, well, would this be, I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted her to be unlike me. I wanted her to remember everything in the coma. And he said, is that possible? And he said, well, yes and no. He said, the first answer is we don't know. And the second answer is that anything is possible, because when you're in coma, your brain neurons are firing and misfiring, and new directions are being formed. And there are cases of people who come out of coma. And of course, there's the known case where people come out and they're cranky and they have all this physical rehabilitation. But there are cases of like the nastiest person coming out sweet. And there are cases of, he named me these cases and I loved them so much I got excited. There was one woman who woke up and she wanted her violin. And the only thing was she did not have a violin and she did not play any instrument whatsoever, but she kept asking and asking, and they gave her the violin and she played like a virtuosa, and she's now playing concert halls. And I kept asking him, how can that be possible? And he said, well, again, we don't know. Like maybe it's an innate ability that all of us have. Maybe we're all sort of savants and it just comes out. Or he said, maybe it's cellular memory. There are a group of scientists who believe that your ancestors, they have the DNA comes down through, and maybe your great aunt was a virtuoso violinist, and that's suddenly what you have now. And as soon as I saw that, I thought, that is great. That, first of all, that frees me up to do whatever I want in the writing, and nobody's going to say that's not going to happen. And second of all, I found it completely interesting to be in her coma and imagine the things that, that I might have felt. I mean, actually, I think what I might have felt would be pure terror, but Stella is very practical and she's a nurse and she knows medicine. So that's how I did that.
Yeah. Wow.
Okay.
It's so persuasive. Oh, your turn. Sorry.
My question. Okay. I was fascinated by the structure of the novel. How we go both into Juliet's point of view and Michael's husband is his captain's log, but we also hear from Sybil, the little girl, which I love because Sybil is she's so honest. And the thing that I thought was the most fascinating was it wasn't their stories and memories that solved the puzzle of what happened. It's more that someone outside who tells them. There's the doctor that Juliet and Sybil go to who tells them that stories are a way in. That's just a way in, and then you get to tell the real story. And I was struck because that sounded like when you were talking about how you wrote the novel, that it was somebody else's story, that couple with the baby. That was the story that allowed you into this story. So can you talk about the structure, was that always the structure or did you stumble upon it? And what discoveries did you make in terms of structuring the book the way it is?
Yeah, I did have to, again, stumble and fail many times trying to discover how this story should be told. I find, as someone who teaches writing too, that really no one has a dearth of story. Everyone has wonderful stories to tell, but the art comes when you figure out how you tell the story.
Right.
And there's so many infinite choices to do that. But when I realized that I had two characters and I am quite interested in relationships, I knew that this sort of duet would be interesting for me to work almost like a play-like structure. I had them speaking in these little sections, as you see in the book. They sort of pithy little sections, and but they were both in the same time frame. So it was Michael's captain's log and Juliet's experiences on the boat in real time at the same time. And then I just noticed that there was like energy missing. And so I actually had a conversation with my husband, who's a very helpful when I'm trying to talk through things like this. I feel like I need Juliet to be looking back on this event instead of in the present with Michael. There's not enough juxtaposition between those two voices. And I was like, but I can't do that. I can't have all this little sections and all these different time frames. And he was like, why not? Just give it a shot. So I did. And then I found that Juliet was actually in the present looking back. And that's when I understood that something had happened, that Michael is no longer in the story, but I didn't know why. So it added the tension that I needed to to tell the story. And so that first part that I read is Juliet sitting in her closet looking back on the journey. You know, the kids are fine, but Michael's not home. So then you kind of want to know how. And then when Sybil started to speak, that was completely unanticipated. My daughter is 8, and she says really adorable things, and I'm smart, I'm a writer, I know when I have good material. And so I would write down her little speeches, and some of those are almost
They're
verbatim.
hilarious.
Yeah.
They were hilarious, but it wasn't just that they were hilarious. You know, as a mother of a son, I can remember that language, that they were exactly true. That's how kids think, up to the point where they're babbling on about something and they say, "That's it, the end."
The end, right? Yeah, I know. I can't really take much credit for that, except for being smart. I'm a smart plagiarizer. Yeah. You got to write what surrounds you, you know, and her voice and that the strength. And I think, and it ends up that Sybil, who is not my daughter, is a separate fictional character, but like she ends up being very important to the book, and she gets like the last beat of the story, which I did not see coming.
Oh, I love that she did.
Yeah, and that felt right. Okay, my turn. All right. So
good, because I was going to barrel ahead with another question.
Yeah, no,
so go ahead.
No, this is like zooming past, and we do have questions, and that's so great. Thank you guys for the questions, and we will totally get
excellent.
to them. Yeah, we'll get to those. So I one thing I wanted to talk to you about is I felt like your 3 main characters, Stella, Simon, and Libby, are all good people. Simon's loyal and loving, and so is Stella. And Libby is maybe a little bit more like rigid. She has a journey to go through, but she's a nurturing doctor and a loyal friend, a very loyal friend. To Stella, they both are for a long time. So they attempt to do right by one another. And of course, they do make mistakes, but there's no one nasty or really disloyal in the whole book, except for, I would say, the shitty fellow band member who kicks out Simon out of the band. You know, so do you deliberately try to create characters who are ethical people, and you know, or were you just in a charitable mood when you wrote this
No,
book?
you know, the interesting thing is, in my first draft, when I sent the book around, you know, my editor and other people said, you know, we hate Simon. They all hated Simon. I kept saying, well, you won't. He's going to change. People were really upset about that. And people were also really angry with what Libby did. And I kept saying, but she does it for the right reasons. And I thought, okay, I have to go back and look at this again. I didn't want to make them, you know, really, really good people. I wanted to make them human people. When we were all pressed, who knows what we will do? Sometimes we will do bad things and tell ourselves we're doing it for the right reason. And then later on, we will find out, oh, I screwed up. But that's what it is to be human. I was really interested in writing it about people who do screw up and come to realize why. And hopefully they can, you know, learn something and move on. But I just found that whole idea of doing something bad really interesting, because, you know, in America, we all talk about, you know, there are second chances and we like people who are rehabilitated. But, you know, what I wanted to see, like, well, what does that look like? And what's the right thing to do? I mean, even in the end of the book, I don't want to talk about what happens in the end, but Stella makes this decision not to reveal some information. And even then I was thinking, that's not what I would do. And I don't even know if that's the best thing to do, but it felt true to her and it felt human. And that was what interested me. So that's why I did it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's interesting. So you wrote Simon back a little bit from after getting some feedback.
Yeah, he was a lot
good.
nastier, but I sort of wanted that, and I didn't want to lose that, because I think that, you know, no villain thinks that he is a villain. You know, even serial killers think they are doing something that they need to do. Okay, so I want to ask you, because I also read and loved Schroeder, your past book. I always wonder if for writers, if one book builds on the one before it, or when you go into a new book, do you feel, oh my God, this is an entirely new entity and I don't know how to do this. So did you feel that that if you hadn't written Schroeder, you couldn't have written this particular book? Or were there any lessons that you carried forward? Or is it totally new?
Yes, absolutely. I think you're right that you do build on it's writing books would get easier if you didn't then just throw yourself more challenges, I
Right.
mean, so like I felt proud of Schroeder, and I felt like I had learned a lot, that it was a step forward for me as a writer, and that I had learned a great deal about that. For example, the importance of setting. Schroeder takes place on
Right.
a road trip through New
Right.
England. It's beautiful, and the main character goes with, again, his young daughter, and goes on this sort of unsanctioned kind of wrong-headed road trip. So the importance of setting. Also, yeah, characterization is interesting. I was dealing with the unreliable narrator. Apropos of what you said, some people really had, Schroeder was a likable guy, but there's one or two things he did that were just over the line, across the
Right.
line for people. And I did think of that when I wrote Sea Wife.
But
And
we understood him. I mean, we understood why he was doing what he was doing. And that was what was so great about it and so
Yeah,
interesting.
right. Same for your characters. And that's why I was just asking you about, they seem like good people and they do make mistakes, but that doesn't negate their goodness,
Right.
and I think that sometimes we get into a good bad binary, and when for ourselves and for our literary characters, and that there's something, I like how you're kind of writing against that. And I feel like I am too. Like, I have, some people don't like Michael's politics, but I wanted to really humanize him and make him somebody that you could love, and even if you disagreed with him. So that was something else I learned. But I think that it's absolutely true that this one does build on Schroeder, and I learned a great deal. And now when I think about going into another book, which I would love to write someday, another book, just need to get the kids back in school, that I want to take those ideas to these, the tension of separate voices, and maybe write, 5 voices or more, and create a kind of choral effect in my next book. So sometimes I'm building on books as in the sort of formal, the way I've written them. Again, how I'm telling the story. I'm always trying to change and use and learn how to tell a story better. That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, I think that always happens. I mean, I always tell myself I'm going to save all my drafts so I can see just how I learn. And then I end up throwing them out because there's just too many of them. And also because it's depressing to see my early attempts. But I think you very slowly do learn different things, and you always want to do something that's really, really new, because it's the challenge that's the fun. It's
It
actually
is.
fun.
It is. And when I think about the ask of the reader, I think about that a lot.
Right.
I love reading, but I want to read because the author is giving me something serious to chew on, and
Right.
and
Right.
entertaining in a serious way. So I want to write books like that too, because I'm asking the reader for their time, so
Right.
that, so giving myself a challenge is something that's going to like assure that it's kind of worth it for somebody else to read it. But I
Wait,
want to,
how do you feel? How do you feel when you hear from a reader and the reader has a different view of your story than the one you intended?
interesting. Yes, yes. Um, I'm like, if you liked it, any interpretation is fine with me. You liked it, you bought it, it's yours. I mean, the text doesn't belong to me anymore.
Right. And readers bring their own lives into what they're reading.
Right.
I
Yeah, right.
always said, I say that as a writer, you're supposed to put your truest self on the page so that readers can find their truest self, which is not the same as
Absolutely.
yours.
Absolutely. Another version of that same quote is, you don't read literature, literature reads you, you know,
Oh,
that
I love that. That's a
how
good
you, I
one.
don't know who
I'm
said
gonna
it.
steal that one.
I'm not, but it's the idea that when you read a book, yeah, you are learning it. The way you react to a book says a lot about you and your
Right.
past experiences and the experiences you've had with somebody like Simon, who it just reminds you of that, and it reminds you of your past. There's a deeply personal experience.
Yeah. I guess since we have 10 more minutes, we could take
Oh, we
questions
should,
now.
yeah,
We should take some questions
I
from
want
people.
to, can I thank Barbara for telling me it's Outerbridge Reach was the name of the Robert
Oh, I
Stone
see
book.
that. Oh, that's
Yeah,
great.
thank you, Barbara.
That's great.
Oh my God, the questions disappeared. Do you see the questions? I can't see them for some reason.
Oh, no.
no.
Oh, wait. Yes, I do.
I can see them.
I can see them.
Okay, and you're good at this, Caroline. You go ahead. You can take it away. And Jenny, maybe can I help? No.
I don't know what happened. They just disappeared. I was looking at them the whole time.
Oh boy.
I know one of them was.
I've got them. I've got
Got
them.
them? Okay.
Okay, and this one for me and this one for Amity. Julie, hi Julie, says, in this book, the characters grow so much more so than in any characters in your previous books. Is this related to your own growth? Wow, I don't know. I don't really think so. I think it was more in relationship to my whole writing process where I was just thinking harder. And actually for this book, I had a new editor at Algonquin who was pushing me a different way. And I would say that's the reason, that's the answer why. Lydia asked Amity, could you talk a bit about Kenyon College interview in the last chapter of Sea Wife?
Sure. I don't think I've ever been asked that questions too. Are you an alum? I had a boyfriend, a beloved boyfriend who went to Kenyon, ex-boyfriend, obviously. And I think that's where that came from. But the interview was the idea that I get a lot of questions from readers about this, because it's the back matter in the back of Sea Wife. And I love hearing talk about different interpretations. Some people hate it, some people love it. And it's just these ideas that there were these outtakes of the novel. These were things that I actually wrote while I was writing the novel. There's sometimes I think an author writes, writers are all totally different. Some people write just headlong and they know where they're going. I would stop, and if something occurred to me, like, wouldn't that be interesting if there was an alumni magazine? A lot of us get these magazines, about this trip that my family took. And I wrote the interview, and then it does end the back matter section of the book. And in those outtake sections, there's a lot of other things: poetry by Anne Sexton, snippets from Juliet's dissertation, which of course is not real. I had to write it, but
Oh, no.
and they yes, it's the first and last dissertation
Wow.
ever, right? It was fictional, but I really enjoyed collating those and putting it in the back of the book. I don't consider that the end of the book. I consider the end of the book the end of the story. And the notes section are just sort of like, extra nuggets to think about. And it was, again, a formal experimentation for me, something to give the reader to think about. That's a great question.
That's interesting, because I listened to the audiobook and I didn't fully I didn't realize those weren't part of the book in the same way. I thought that was the ending of the book. So I gave it more weight, actually, the ending. So that's so wonderful.
Really? Yeah. So, yes. And some people really dig it, but I think people feel like it's exactly necessary to read. There's a little, maybe this wasn't in the audiobook, I didn't notice that, but I did listen to the audiobook and it's amazing. But in the book itself, I write a little, a note that says, if you don't want to read this, you can skip it with a clean conscience.
You don't do that. You go to the next thing, but that's
because I have the experience of knowing with Schroeder, I have footnotes in that some people didn't read the footnotes. I'm like, that's fine. You don't have to read the footnotes. We have a great question for both of us at the top of the Q&A. This one got voted up. So these books are both about marriage. This is from Lisa. Are there some or many autobiographical details besides the coma? But I assume also about marriage, like, and this is a question you asked me first, Caroline, like why, and this is maybe why would they put us together?
Right.
But do you have it? Why marriage? Why is it so interesting? And how do you use your own experience with marriage in this fiction?
It's really, really interesting. I'm on my second marriage now, which is a really happy one. My first marriage was really a disaster, really a terrible, horrific marriage. But to me, the interesting thing about it is that my first husband and I have become friends. Um, and it's interesting to me to think, oh yeah, he's definitely a good friend of mine now, but I would never, ever want to be in a relationship with him. And I thought about that a lot. In terms of the marriage and the relationships and with or without you, none of that was autobiographical for my first husband or my last husband. Just my keen interest on what makes people stay together and what happens as you get older. And I know that in my marriage now, we would talk a lot about like, well, what happens when we have kids? Is it going to destroy the marriage? And it didn't. So we were lucky. And then we thought, well, what happens when our son goes off to college? Because that's when marriages always break up. And nothing happened. It was just as good as before. So I was just really, really interested in that whole object of change.
Yeah, yeah. I love I'm fascinated, like everyone is, with marriage. It's something so important, but you can't really see into anyone else's
Right.
marriage.
No, you can't.
You have your own, and it's such a huge part of your life. I think a marriage is one of the, I think, biggest defining factors of life satisfaction, right? So
Right.
it's so important, but you don't know how other people do it. They could do it totally different way, and like maybe it would be cool to know. But there's a great quote from Marianne Moore, which I don't have in front of me, but it was something I saw while I was researching Sea Wife, but it's something like, there's no such thing as a prudent marriage. Marriage is a crusade. There's always tragedy in it. So
Yeah.
I love the idea of that. And for me, I used it as a metaphor. I couldn't tell, is the boat the metaphor for the marriage, or is the marriage the metaphor for the boat? Like the journey that you take,
Right.
you take through life with your longtime partner, whether or not you're married, and how important that is, and how often, even if you make it to the other shore, you can be sort of battered by the weather. So it was a very easy, a natural metaphor for me. I think fortunately, my husband and I do not disagree politically. That's a big
That's a
problem.
blessing.
That's a big problem for Juliet and Michael. People are like worried, definitely for me about that. But no, there are gender differences between my husband and myself that have been persistently irritating throughout in our lives, and ways in which there's a line in the book where Juliet, despite her education, and Michael, despite his fancy Kenyan education, they just, when they get married, they resort to these gender stereotypes that they thought had been, consigned to the cultural
Right.
ash heap. That's what they say, right? And I know a lot of couples that feel that way. So why, once, especially maybe it's in my generation, but why, despite knowing everything you just like roll over to gender stereotypes and norms that don't work for people anymore? And so I relate to that.
Right. Yeah, there's another question for both of us from Joanne Rhodes. Thank you, Joanne. She said she's talking about both our books, the relationship intricacies that reveal themselves in new and uncertain settings, and how they impact us when we are back home. She also wanted to know if you had any autobiographical epiphanies after the completion of your book, Amity. But I like that whole idea of setting. I think that's something that does impact both our books. Certainly a journey at sea with a family is a huge sea change. And certainly so is a coma. The one thing that I learned from my coma is when I woke up, and I couldn't remember anything. I was in the hospital for 3 months, but I remember after the 3 months when things were settling down, a nurse came over to me and said, do you realize how lucky you are? And I said, what are you talking about? And she said, well, I just want to tell you that your husband has been here every day. And I, of course, with the memory blockers, I didn't remember it. I was always asking, where is he? Where is he? And getting angrier and angrier. And she said, no, he's been here every day. And most of our patients, when their significant other has trouble, they vanish. They just don't come back. And I started thinking about that, about this is a really big thing. And sometimes when you go through, it's unfortunate that when you go through happy times, really happy times with your partner, you don't change or learn or bond as much, at least I don't think you do, as when you're going through the times when your life seems to be ripping apart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a beautiful answer.
I wish it wasn't that way, but it seems to be for me.
I think that's a beautiful question, Joanne. Thank you so much. I noticed we only have a minute though, so I don't know if it's like a time for me to get started, but what do you think, Jenny?
You want to do one more and then we'll.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So the question I'm looking at it too is how does she read Sea Wife and wondering how when the settings that we experience and how they impact us when we're back home, any autobiographical epiphanies that continue after the completion of your book, Amity. Oh, wow. That's such a good question. I can't tell you how weird it was to reread Sea Wife in quarantine. I did not write it knowing where we were going to be going in this world with COVID-19, and then to write a book that somehow spoke to a lot of the feelings I was feeling living through publishing a book through a pandemic. And because suddenly my house is a boat, and people comment that this room itself looks like a boat. This is my study. And, downstairs, like hopefully my son is hopefully taking care of my daughter. I don't know, it's, but it's a new experience to be together so much, to have to rely on each other so much. And I thought we knew each other well before, and we did, but we are learning so much more. So I have to say it's been moving for me to read Sea Wife in this context and to realize how much more I personally had to learn about togetherness and about boundaries and about myself as a mother and a writer and a partner. So it's been.
So that's that quote you were saying about the book. You change, like the book, I forget the quote, but you're reading, the book's reading you, or you're reading the book. But
that's right.
I've really been writing it.
What's that?
You changed even from writing it because of
Yes.
the times that have changed for all of us.
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, thank you both for doing this. We really appreciate it. And do you have your books? I don't know if you have a copy to hold up for everyone to see. The books you can get them on bookshop.org. And I also wanted to mention that if people could consider a donation to the Brattleboro Literary Festival, it's free to attend, but we do have expenses. And next year's our 20th anniversary. So, the link to donate is on our website, brattleboro.org.
Look at that beautiful map.
Sorry, map.
Oh, wow.
It's like there. Yeah.
I did the audio. I did read it, but I didn't.
It's such a pretty book. This is not real water. It's not there.
Thank you so much, Jenny, and thank you,
Brattleboro,
Brattleboro, one of my favorite festivals. And Amity, thank you so much for doing this.
I loved your book. Everybody, buy the book.
Buy the books, please, and support the Brattleboro Festival. It's the most wonderful one on the planet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Be well.
Bye, everybody. Yes, stay safe.
Bye.
Read.
Read.
Bye.
Bye.